Alfred Hitchcock did an amazing job with this movie. It is one of the few films that actually started the whole Stalker franchise, and also psychological horror franchise. It is definitely a must-see and a classic that in the horror franchise that anyone would be crazy enough not to see. The character Norman Bates is well, let's just say a very phenomenal character in the horror franchise, and definitely one of those that is very recognizable to this day, especially with lines such as, "We all go a little mad sometimes," which, of course, I'm sure is definitely not wrong. Sigourney Weaver really showed her character in this movie, and also became one of my most favorite actresses of all time after seeing her in this performance and also some of the other Alien movies. Even Alien Resurrection and Alien 3, even though they weren't great, I still loved her performance. This one definitely gave a whole new genre of isolation in the horror genre, because it definitely gave me the creeps, and it definitely made me feel isolated at times, just by watching the characters on a stranded spaceship in the middle of space. John Carpenter really knows how to make some good movies, but the one that really got him big, alongside Deborah Hill, was Halloween. This movie definitely hit big for Jamie Lee Curtis as she became the horror queen of the genre. And, well, she's just an amazing actress all around. Seeing how she is going to make a comeback in the new Halloween movie that should be coming out next year, it's only a matter of time that we hope that it'll be just as good as this classic one, as it gives you the creeps about feeling like you're being watched and also being stalked. And pretty much the same thing, so yeah. We're supposed to feel safe in our dreams, right? I mean, they're not supposed to actually be real, right? Well, Nightmare on Elm Street proved that wrong when Wes Craven brought one of his debut films out, and of course, we got Robert Englund to play as the titular killer, Freddy Krueger. Even though he was very goofy at times, it was hard to take him seriously at times at some of the other scenes because of just how creepy he is, and also being seen that if you get killed in your dreams, you get killed in real life. Huh, I guess you just aren't safe anywhere anymore, huh? Poltergeist is one of the most popular films that Steven Spielberg made, alongside Jaws, but that's going to be on the list later on. Poltergeist is definitely one of those classics that just doesn't exactly focus on horror, but also focuses on the characters themselves, showing good character development and showing a loving for the family themselves. Because you gotta have good characters in a story if you want to root for them to win. Otherwise, you just wish the killer would kill them already. In this case, that's definitely not it. But this is definitely one of the must-see films that will definitely creep you out and give you shivers down your spine. Torture porn seems to be one of the top things in horror, and well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of helped with that. With Leatherface as the main killer in this, he definitely shows that he's definitely does quite a bit with not only just a chainsaw, but just with hooks and everything else. And yes, even though Leatherface is the main scare in this, his whole family in general is just something that you do not want to meet or have dinner with. As a matter of fact, they have a scene that's just quite disturbing. One of the classic monster movies is Frankenstein. Frankenstein is a must-see mainly because, well, it's a classic. It's definitely one that still creeps me to this day, and does have a few laughs here and there. But honestly, how could you go wrong with the monsters? The next one on the list is Dracula. This one still gives me shivers down my spine, just seeing Dracula staring at you with his wide eyes that are telling you to do what he pleases. And oh my gosh, just the thought of his face, it just brings you chills down your spine. This is definitely another classic monster movie that I would highly Speaking of Dracula, there was another one that came out called Nosferatu. This one is a very, very old film and actually does not have any dialogue in it whatsoever. Well, it does, but it shows it by title cards. Mainly it's just music, and well, music is a good part in horror movies because it gives you the shivers down your spine, and Nosferatu definitely does that. This film still is probably one of my most favorite horror films of all time to this day. Another Wes Craven film on the list, and one that I would recommend both the original and remake for, is The Last House on the Left. The Last House on the Left is definitely one that's very cringe-worthy to watch. It has so many scenes in it that just depict something that could actually happen to someone, and especially to a lot of teenagers that are females. Mainly because we definitely live in a world where there are people out there that do terrible, terrible things to others, such as sexual assault and violence in general. I mean, this film it was hard to watch at times. It's definitely easier to watch now since I've watched it a couple times, but be warned watching it. It can be a little too much at times. And of course we can't forget one of our other famous serial killers, Jason, in Friday the 13th. Although, fun fact, this first film did not feature Jason, but his mother. And I would say that's a spoiler, but this movie's been out for ages, and I'm sure everyone already knows the concept already. It's definitely a very good cliche of horror films with slashers, mainly because it tells us the whole rules of scary movies and what to live by. And, how to survive them. Heck, just, listen to Jamie Kennedy's character in Scream. He'll tell you all the rules you need to know. One that plays in the similar role of Friday the 13th is Phenomena, or in the US is called Creepers, but I'm just going to call it Phenomena. And this one is made by Dario Argento, one of the directors that I have to definitely check out ever since I saw this movie. I honestly had no idea about this gentleman until I watched this movie, and I had no idea about this movie until I've heard of Clock Tower. Clock Tower was inspired by this movie, and if you play the Clock Tower games, then you know what you're going into, but if not, I just recommend seeing the movie in general, so that way you don't get any spoilers. But definitely a must-see for any horror fans out there, especially in the slasher franchise. Ever had that feeling that whenever you went into the water, you felt you just were too scared to go in because you couldn't see what was underneath? Well, Jaws definitely was the purpose for that. Jaws did so much to freak people out when it first came out, and it still does to this very day. One of the classics, and definitely one of my favorites, and definitely one of my favorites from Steven Spielberg in general. It definitely gives you that fear that you just don't know what you're seeing, and that's even scarier to think about. The music in general is definitely one of the most popular soundtracks of all time because it gives you that feeling that something's coming nearer and nearer, and it gives you even more fright because you don't know what's going to happen after it gets there to the end. Silence of the Lambs is a classic in the thriller franchise and revolves around the killer Hannibal Lecter. This film was based upon books that were made, and this is just one of the few in the franchise that honestly became successful for its dialogue, for its thrill, for its just overall story and characters. It is definitely one that you must see for yourself. We all have fun playing games, but if you get someone asking you if they want to play a game, better take caution, especially if it's a puppet by the name of Jigsaw. Well, that's not the puppet's name, but you get what I'm going with this one. Saw is definitely not exactly the best franchise ever made, but it still has a gripping story and also just overall tension in the first film. This one is actually getting a new sequel coming out that will be called Jigsaw. and it'll focus mainly on the killer's actions, but someone else taking his call because, well, Jigsaw ends up being killed off later on in the series. So, if you want to watch Jigsaw, I suggest you try at least watching the first film to figure out what all it's about. This film gives me chills to my spine every single time I say its name, The Exorcist. This is probably one of the best films I've ever seen in horror in general. I had a hard time watching it at times and even turned it off the first time I watched it because I couldn't finish it because of just how creeped out I was by this film. This film gives so much eeriness and so much chills to your spine because of just how creepy it is. Just seeing this little girl get possessed by a demon, it just makes you wonder what kind of demons are out there in real life. And, well, that is if you believe in them. It's just a sight to not even think about. Ever loved playing with dolls? Well, Chucky is definitely the doll you do not want to play with. Based upon Robert the Doll, which is a very freaky and very interesting story that you must check out. This focuses on a kid that gets a doll by the name of Chucky. Well, he names it Chucky. They're the Good Time Buddy dolls, and it ends up being possessed by a serial killer who knows these certain voodoo magic stuff. I would go more into it, but I recommend you watch it for yourself. The first one is definitely a must-see. The other ones are more on the funny side, but I'd still recommend them. One of the films that helped settle in the found footage franchise is the Blair Witch Project. Maybe not for everyone, but it definitely got a lot of scares back when it was released, mainly because a lot of people thought that it was actually a real film. You know, actual students that went missing. And luckily it wasn't. Luckily it was all fake. But definitely a good way to cash in the grabs and the money, right? But still, overall it is a freaky film, especially when you don't exactly see what's out there. In a lot of the scenes, it's very freaky because you see the characters look out of their campsites out at night, hearing noises that they can't even explain what they are. And the ending is definitely one of those most memorable scenes of all time. I won't recommend this one to the very weak stomach people because, well, it's Cannibal Holocaust. This is probably one of the first films that did the found footage franchise, just like the Blair Witch. And, well, it's definitely one that was almost called a snuff film because of how violent and how gruesome it was. Actually killing real animals and also looking like it actually kills the actual people. Luckily they didn't, but it's still really hard to watch some of the animals that get killed off, especially one scene that involves a giant turtle. And the scary thing is that it's not exactly the tribes themselves, but the actual people doing the footage that do this. This film I recommend mainly because of its certain moral message to the story about certain power over certain groups, certain communities, and how we should, love one another and be respectful of one another. And, well, it goes more into that kind of stuff. I won't go too much into it, but be warned if you do watch the movie. After all, it was banned in a couple countries just because of how vulgar and very graphic it is. So, viewer discretion advised if you're going to watch it. One that is more on the comedic list than scary is The Evil Dead. This one stars Bruce Campbell as the main character, Ash. And, well, they find an evil book that's just pretty much crawling with dead and evilness. And, of course, you get the few raping trees as well. It's one that's definitely scary, but also very funny at the same time. Later on in the sequels, they went for a more comedic feel with it, which honestly was a good thing to do. And honestly, it's probably one of my favorite films of this day. Another one I would say is in the comedic area is Re-Animator. This movie is kind of like similar to Evil Dead, except it focuses on a doctor that tries to bring the dead to life, except something weird happens when he does. something turns them evil, turns them to something different. It's definitely one that's a must-see, and one that's very interesting. It is a little violent, but it's not exactly as graphic as some other movies out there. Funny Games is, well, kind of an ironic twist to the title. Yes, it does have its comedic moments, but it's mainly very freaky and very disturbing to watch. Now, it's not as bad as some movies out there like Cannibal Holocaust was, or Clockwork Orange, but it definitely goes out there by saying that it's, well, it has a mixed message. And it definitely shows that you shouldn't rely on the cliches of the heroes always surviving the film. Now, that kind of gives it away of what happens, but honestly, it's one that's definitely a must-see. Are you always morbidly curious about certain things that happen to people or things? Well, Final Destination is where it's at. Final Destination isn't exactly too graphic, it's more cheesy in a way, but it has some very interesting death scenes that occur that you just can't help but just want to watch. And the whole series in general may not be exactly the greatest, but they're still fun to watch, especially if you want a buddy to watch it with you. Do you like scary movies? Well, that is what Ghostface would call and ask his victims before he was going to slay them. Scream is another one that was made by Wes Craven, and honestly, is one of those that is just a must-see for everyone. Even if you're not a horror fan, it still has some stuff in it that makes it kind of goofy at times, and that's awesome. It's great that Wes Craven can make a movie that's scary and funny and emotional at the same time. It also focuses on the cliche of horror films and the whole rule thing. Like I just said with Jamie Kennedy, he has a character that pretty much tells all the rules of scary movies. And, you know, how to survive them, that is. So, yes, it's definitely a must-see. One other classic on the list is Vincent Price's starring in House on Haunted Hill. If you haven't seen this movie, it's definitely one that is a must-see. It is very freaky, even though, you know, to this day, it's definitely very cheesy with its effects. It still lays on the very eeriness of the house and the isolation inside the house. And it's just overall creepiness, the creepy factor of it. I mean, it's a good one. It's definitely a must-see for any horror fan out there. M. Night Shyamalan really blew us away with a lot of films during the 90s, and one of them was The Sixth Sense. This one was the one that definitely brought the whole twist into psychological horror, as Bruce Willis's character tries to help a little kid with how he sees ghosts and dead people. And, well, even though it does have its scary scenes, it's more on the emotional side. And that's one of the things I liked about it, was just how it gripped me in with the characters, and how much I just loved every character, and it got me wanting to wonder what was going to happen next. By far, one of my most favorite films of all time is Clockwork Orange. This film is definitely not for everyone, but it definitely is very, very interesting to see, as it is very controversial and also very interesting to watch in general with its colorful background and its, well, just overall colorful characters and this very dystopian kind of feel with it. It is based on the book, which Stanley Kubrick did a great job with keeping it really similar to how the book was, aside from the end. And, well, overall, the movie's just wonderful to see. Even though Alex isn't exactly the greatest hero of all time, as a matter of fact, more of an anti-hero, it's really cool to see what happens with him and what all they do to try to see if they can cure his bad that he has inside of him. Another movie that I felt did great with its twist is Sleepaway Camp. Maybe not well known for everyone around the horror franchise, but it's definitely one that has a gripping twist at the end that will leave you with your mouth open. Just, you know, be ready for it. it's definitely one that definitely threw me off as soon as I watched the whole movie from beginning to end.